Morning, Mike. Last one. Relieved, pleased, excited?
Excited because it's got the potential to be a really good day if we execute what we need to execute. Hoping it's going to be a really good game because obviously they've got everything to play for, and so have we within context in terms of sending 40,000+ home on a bank holiday weekend with a smile on their face. So overriding feelings, excitement.
How do you look back at your 13 games? I mean, of course, there's plenty of caveats because of injuries and so on. But when you look back now at those 13 games, or 12 plus tomorrow, what's your overriding feelings about them?
I'm really proud of what I've done. I appreciate what some of the narrative's going to be in terms of, I sat here at the start and said I'm going to be judged by winning and losing, and ultimately that's what I will be judged by. But I've had a huge amount to deal with, which a lot of people won't appreciate. And I'm not going to sit here and make excuses, but I've had, as I said a few times, I think I've had quite a difficult hand to deal with in terms of player availability, in terms of fixtures, in terms of one or two things internally. So I'm really proud of what I've done because it was a completely different experience for me. It's okay, obviously early in the season I took them for 3 games and things went really well, and as I said, the transition was a really smooth transition. This period's been a lot clunkier in terms of trying to get the group where we want them to get to. But from a personal standpoint, it will stand me in really good stead moving forward in terms of whatever my future looks like. There's a tinge of disappointment because I know how important this club is to thousands and thousands of people, and obviously the type of character I am, I want to try and please as many of those people as I can. So there's a tinge of disappointment there, but obviously I'm not going to sit here and tell you the ins and outs of everything that goes on every single day. I'll go home on Saturday evening really proud of the things that I've had to deal with.
Do you feel slightly caught between a rock and a hard place because I guess it's common sense to give you the interim job with a number of games left, but as you say, it's perhaps slightly unfair because in the future people will just look at that column of win, loss and draws and draw conclusions from that.
To a degree. I think anyone that will just look at the win, lose and draw, so if it's a prospective employer for instance, and that's how they recruit a coach or head coach, with all due respect I don't want to work for them, there is, like anything, you can it depends on what lens you're looking through. You can find stats to pull out positives, you can find stats to pull out negatives. That's football. And I think a lot of the very best managers at the highest level do that. They push a narrative and they're quite clever at it in terms of this is what we've done, and they're very clever at manipulating that narrative. But unfortunately, that's just not my character. I think I'm quite a well-grounded, humble guy, and I will always. I've tried my hardest never to sit here and make excuses, and I could have done. The facts are I've lost more than I've won. The facts, and that's something that I'll have to stomach. But as I said, I'll go back to my point. There's been a huge amount that I've had to deal with, which, and I've said this 1,000 times, you have the most experienced managers sat here, and I'm not sure what they could have done differently. My personal opinion.
Is there anything you'd have done differently looking back over those 13 games, or any game that you think actually?
The first game was a real disappointment for me because I think I tried to run before I could walk, and that was a huge eye opener for me in terms of that first 30 minutes probably. That was an eye opener in terms of where the group's at physically, mentally. That I couldn't do what I did last time, so I had to strip one or two things back and reevaluate where the squad was. So that was a huge eye opener for me. Obviously, the Blackburn game is something that I have a huge amount of disappointment for because I didn't see that coming. And although I love the group and I think we've got we should be really proud of the group we've got. it hurts when you come away and you feel like you've done everything from your perspective, and maybe that hasn't been executed on the other side. So they're probably 2 points that probably the first two that kind of stick out to me in terms of the disappointments. But as I said, I could sit here and spin loads of positives. There's a few that I'm really, really proud of, but yeah, they'll probably be the two.
I mean, there are some games, and Leeds is an example, where the team's exceptional, and there are other games, obviously like Blackburn, where it was the complete opposite. Which in a sense, does it show you the limitations, if you like, of this group at this moment in time?
I wouldn't say it shows the limitation. I think it shows the naivety of the group. I think it shows the youth in the group, and it's not just football, it's life. Young people make mistakes, and we've all been there as adults. Everyone in this room's made mistakes. The difference with football is they make it so publicly and they get scrutinised for it, whereas, with all due respect, the kind of average person, they'll make a mistake and they'll have an opportunity to reflect on it, and it won't get so scrutinised. And it's the same for me in terms of a young coach. I've quite clearly made some mistakes, which I've said from the outset. I took the team 2.5 years ago, and I was nowhere near ready and made a load of mistakes, but it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Some of the things that have happened during this period would be the best thing that ever happened to me, but the fans don't want to hear that, do they? The fans don't want to hear that the players at times are naive. They don't want to hear that they're a young group and we need to kind of come through these periods. They don't want to hear that because they just want to win, which is more than acceptable. But what I think what it probably has highlighted for kind of Blackburn to the Leeds, even if you look at all the games, really, the games have been they've been 1 goals, apart from the Southampton game, which I was comfortable with because we obviously got the game back to 2-2, and I just felt we had two options. We had an option to kind of shut up shop, or I just felt the momentum in that game was going in our favour, and then obviously they make 3 Premier League £20 million plus subs and win the game 4-2. All the other games apart from the Blackburn game have been 1 goal. They've been margins within the game. So the group's more or less there. It's the fine margins, and it's something we spoke about this week in terms of if they want to get to where they want to get to individually, or if they're going to get us to where we want to get to, it's the fine margins that they have to improve upon, because I think that's what sets the difference between the teams at the top, the teams in the middle, and the teams towards the bottom.
And going forward, you will look back at these 13 games and take something from them to move forward. What would you say to the club that the club needs to do in terms of the team? Is it more experience, or are there other angles as well to take from the games that you've experienced as a head coach?
I wouldn't say experience. I know the experience one is something that's a bit of a talking point. I think that there may be a need for 1 or 2. When I say experience, I'm not saying like 30 plussers. I'm saying people that have maybe got 200-300 league games in the Championship. That could probably be something that they could look at. For me, and I've said this word a few times, it's depth for me, because there was a number of games where we're one of the youngest teams, if not the youngest team in the EFL Championship, which we are all on board with, and we're all clear on why that is. But then on top of that, when you lose 3 or 4 players, whether it be injury or suspensions, at times it's more than 3 or 4, and then you're relying on under 18s to sit on the bench, under 21s to sit on the bench, you're getting even younger. For me, it would be probably more depth. But on the flip side of that, I'm sure that if the next head coach doesn't have the level of injuries we've had this season, people won't be talking about depth, because if you look at the injury room, you could pick a really strong team from the injury room. So yeah, for me, my kind of overriding thoughts on it would be probably more depth in a number of positions.
Sheffield Wednesday then, going into the game, you'd hope to get Dennis Serkin involved at some point. It's the last chance now with Sheffield Wednesday. Is it likely to see anything?
Dennis won't be involved, no. Dennis won't be involved. He's trained. He's been training with the group, and as I think I said a couple of weeks ago, it's that risk and reward. Do we Do we look to involve him and kind of speed the process up a little bit from a perspective of just trying to get him on the pitch, or do we accept the fact that maybe it's probably a couple of weeks too early, so Dennis won't be involved, but he seems to be going in the right direction, and fingers crossed everything will be set for him to have a really strong pre-season and show everyone what a wonderful footballer he is.
And finally for me, Sheffield Wednesday, that technically got something to play for, which perhaps means it'll maybe bring something to the game, give it a bit of an edge. Definitely,
and I've spoken to the players about that. I think it's got the potential to be a really good day. In terms of, we've the absolute minimum we can offer the fans is a good bank holiday weekend and a win to go away in the summer, and I think they have to try and get a result there. I think they've got I know kind of destiny's in their own hands a little bit, but I think they have to try and get a result. I don't think they can rely on the other results. I haven't been in that situation, but I can imagine if I was the head coach of Sheffield Wednesday, I'd be fully focused on trying to get a result from the game. So hopefully that will open itself up for a good game. I don't see them being overly aggressive in the first phase of the game. I think my personal opinion, having watched them, I think they'll be quite reserved and see how the kind of game unfolds. But as the game kind of unravels, I expect it to hopefully be a little bit more exciting than what we've seen in previous weeks.
Right.
Cheers.
Hi Mike. Jack Hart won a couple of awards last night, obviously. I think we're all honest, there is a possibility, quite a strong one, that it might be Jack's last game for the club this weekend. If that's the case, Sunderland's been good for him and he's been good for Sunderland, hasn't he?
Yeah. I mean, the Jack situation, I don't really read the stuff online, so I don't really know what the narrative is kind of in the kind of media and social media. I'll be really intrigued in terms of the Jack situation, because obviously he's still got a long period on his contract, and I know there was a lot of interest last summer which the club didn't feel was anywhere near their valuation, so it'll be a really interesting summer, and I'm not going to get drawn into Jack or the football club and what the football club want and what Jack wants, but I don't feel it is as completely foregone, if that makes sense, in terms of Jack's just going to leave the football club, because he has a length on his contract still, and the club have demonstrated that they won't be letting anyone go for cheap, so there will be some to and fro, I'm sure, if there is a number of clubs that are interested. But Jack would be probably a positive of the recruitment model, in terms of obviously he came in on loan initially and he took a while to kind of settle, but then towards the back end of the League One season he was obviously very good, and then we got to the summer and Jack didn't come in immediately. It wasn't just, I think he joined us halfway through the trip to Portugal. He came and joined us halfway through that trip, so it wasn't like he came in straight away, but he's gone from strength to strength, really. And look, he's got huge potential. He's still a young man. There's still a lot that he needs to work on. There's still a huge amount of his game that he needs to be better at. In particular, if we're talking about him moving on and going to the Premier League, that's not just one step up for me. The Premier League is like 5 steps up in terms of, we're talking about the best league in the world. So there is a huge amount that he still needs to improve and get better at. But look, he's a good kid. I've always said that. He's a very unique character in terms of he moans about absolutely everything. But you can live with the moaning if he produces the numbers that he's produced. So it'll be an interesting summer. I think I've gone a long way around to answer that question, but my personal opinion is I just don't think it's as kind of, the conclusion is Jack's going to leave the football club, because he's got a lengthy contract and the club have demonstrated they're not going to let players go for anything less than what they feel is value. So it'll be an interesting summer.
Well, the other one for me, I think it's a bit unfair to ask you to sort of pass judgment on everything this season, but in a way, if you sort of boil it down, is perhaps the most important thing that everybody in the club learns, the lessons that are there to be learned from this?
100%, yeah. And I think it's a really good question, and I went to a supporters group a couple of weeks ago, and I was speaking to a number of fans, and I said, I think the players have to reflect, because the reality is some of the players haven't performed to the level that they did do previously. I've got to do some reflection. And listen, I'm not going to shoulder the full responsibility the whole season, but at the same time, you know, I was very, I worked really closely with Tony in terms of preparing the team, and for the best part of 15 months, and I could be really naive and go, you know, I worked with Tony and we got to the playoffs, but I also worked with Tony and he got the sack. So, you know, there's obviously a tinge of disappointment with that period. Then obviously Mick came in, and for whatever reason that didn't work. I worked with Mick, so there's a reflection in terms of me, in terms of what could I have done, but also what do I need to do in the future to get better for me, but also for the football club. And then there's also a reflection, you know, from the football club in terms of obviously there's been a number of decisions this year that some have gone right, some haven't gone particularly right. So I do think there's kind of 3 stages to that reflection, myself personally, and I always look at myself first. I think the players have got to reflect, and I think the football club have got to reflect, and I do feel that this season will be a huge kind of foundation and caveat for us to go forward, because last year was wonderful, it was amazing, I think everyone loved it, but at the same time at times it felt a bit like Disney World, like it's like, how are we here, like how has this happened? This year I've always said I think failure is one of the most important ingredients for success, whether it's player development, whether it's coach development. And I go back to my point, fans don't want to hear that. I fully appreciate that. I wouldn't want to hear that if I'm a fan. But if we don't reflect and we don't improve for next year, then obviously it's not going to be a happy place. So we have to reflect this summer, and we have to improve for next year.
Mike, probably one of the biggest disappointments was in recruitment terms, was the 3 strikers who just barely gave you any goals. But I understand you're releasing Harry Gardner, who's a young kid, Sunderland lad, pretty decent goal scoring record through the ages, and yet never got a sniff of the first team. Was that? Can sometimes recruitment stifle the youngsters coming through?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes I think in terms of strikers, I think I'm going to try and answer this correctly. There's not many kind of what I would call, not say old school, but like traditional number 9s. I think the game's just evolving in a direction. I can't think of many like number 9s, and traditional number 9s also are hugely expensive, because they're just a premium. There's so few of them. And I've said this before, I think the number 9 situation has been talked about a lot this season, and rightly so, you know, because goals have been something we've struggled with at times. So I don't feel the answer for the football club is we have to find a number 9. I think we have to find more attacking options with more variation, and with all due respect, those attackers have to be more consistent. Like I said, some of our attackers this year have performed well, some of our attackers this year haven't performed well. So I'll go back to the previous question. I think there's got to be a reflection for some of our players, because it can't just be we have to recruit new players. Sometimes it's got to be the players we've got to get better, they've got to improve, and part of that's my responsibility, but also the other parts their responsibility. In terms of Harry, you know, this club has demonstrated that if we feel it's right for individuals, we'll give young players opportunities. I think they've demonstrated that in terms of Daniel, Anthony Patterson, Chris Rigg this year. You hope next year, I mean, you don't know who you're going to see, maybe Harrison Jones next year. Zach Johnson's obviously gone out on loan. Matty Young's done really well at Darlington. So there's a lovely little underbed of young players. So in terms of the Harry situation, I can't hugely comment on the club's decision for that. Obviously he's been heavily involved in the 21s group, but I understand your point in terms of we recruited 3 players, so you know that would put Harry kind of 4th or 5th in line. So I do understand your point around that, but that, unfortunately, the industry is ruthless. You know, that's what the industry is, and young players, not just Harry, but all young players have to realise they've got to be better than the next person, and sometimes there's 2 or 3 people in your way. You know, Chris Rigg's done it, so there's prime examples of young players kind of barging, if that's the right phrase to use, senior players out of the way.
And again, you just get the questions because you're there, but when do you think we'll see a new head coach?
You know as much as I do, and I really want to try and give you something, but you genuinely know as much as I do. My focus has obviously been on the team. I felt with the group at times during my period, it's been kind of one step forward, two steps back in terms of we have a solid performance, and I think that's a little bit more like it. And then we follow that up with, I think I've used the phrase a couple of boring performances. I think sometimes that just comes with young people, and I'm not making that as an excuse, but I think sometimes it comes with young people, but that's something that I won't accept and the club won't accept, because we want to get back to the Premier League. So consistency is really important. But go back to your question. You know as much as I do. I've been focusing on the team. I'm presuming that I might get an update after Saturday. But yeah, I'll wait for people above me to kind of update me. But as I said, my focus has been purely on the games.
Mike, on a personal level, what have you learned about yourself as a coach during your time in charge?
I'm not gonna. The first thing that came to mind, I'm not gonna say because it sounds really harsh. What have I learned about myself? I can deal with the pressure. I feel like I can deal with the pressure. I know there will be a narrative that the pressure was too much, but actually during this whole period, I feel like I've been really consistent and really clear on what I want to achieve. I haven't quite achieved that, but I don't feel the processes and the way we've worked day to day have hindered that. I think they've just re-cemented that it's something that I feel I can do at some point, but it's something that I'm not going to overly chase, and it's something that I think will happen when it happens, if it happens. I think the players will let you down. I know it sounds really harsh, but they, for all your diligence and for all your preparation and for for how meticulous you want to be, sometimes players just let you down, and that's something that I've learned, and something that previous people that I've worked under have said. Obviously Tony had 800 plus league games, and he was always a great sounding board for me when we would reflect on games, or we discuss tactics for games or plans for games. He was always an amazing sounding board for me, and I wouldn't say he used that phrase, but he did say sometimes you've got to understand that it doesn't go the way you want it to go.
And just on the players there, what do you hope they've taken from this time as well, from your ideas?
I feel we've laid some really, really strong foundations in terms of the team structurally, in terms of the team structure. I think that's probably taken away from the free-flowing things that we've seen previously, but I do think the kind of free-flowing bits can be something that can be kind of recaptured quite easily. My biggest thing to the players, I just hope they go away this summer and reflect, because I will take a portion of the blame for my kind of 13 games. The club will obviously have a reflection point, but I do feel that sometimes the players get away scot-free a little bit with, it's the head coach's problem or it's the club's problem. My biggest thing for the players, and I'll speak to them after the game on Saturday, they've got to go away and reflect, because some of them haven't hit the levels that they hit previously. So if you have individuals that don't hit the levels previous, common sense will say you don't get the same results in terms of points on the board. So I hope the players go away and reflect. I hope they go away and reflect. And as I said, I go back to my point, I'm really proud of some of the stuff that I've done internally in terms of the group. And hopefully we'll see some of that work next year with the new head coach, just kind of evolves it and takes it forward.